Diane Bucco's here.
All right, yeah, so the roll call. Carrie
Clay is
Cheeseman,
here.
Diane Bucco, Peter Clay, all set. And the first order of business is just as we want to keep this moving along. Tom, do you want to speak to the master plan contract?
Certainly. Yep, everybody's on him. This is the approval of the master plan contract with JML Goldson for $185,000. The process will begin during the summer with various open meetings with the public as far as what to be looking for in starting the master plan project. We do have a intended $75,000 reimbursement from the Commonwealth on this eventually will be receiving. So the price of the contract, the final price would be basically $115, but we are funding it at this point for $185 effectively when the reimbursement comes back. Peter has been on the planning board and the planning board does recommend that. Peter, if you want to add anything to this discussion.
We had a good discussion about it last night, and the discussion was whether the planning board does it by themselves or do they create some kind of committee involving citizens that are interested, other board members or town board members. And what we decided was we're going to talk to the contractor hopefully in the next week or two. And after having that discussion, we're going to decide which way we want to go.
Very well. Diane, any questions?
Nope.
All right. Then we also should say thank you to Margaret Hoffman, right, Tom? She
Yes.
was the one that really went out there and got the 75 grant. All right.
And we also should thank the town of Wenham for approving the funding at town meeting and support
Yes,
of
yes,
this program. This is
So-
the town's project.
Yep.
So thank you to the residents.
Yeah, and it's going to be the whole town. It's going to need to be involved and get their input in. So that's good. So are we ready for a motion then?
I think so.
All right,
I move to approve the Wenham Master Plan contract of $185,000 as presented to the select board on May 13th, 2022.
and we need the contractor's name in there.
Do we? JM Golson,
Right.
LLC.
I second.
Then seconded and roll call vote. Peter,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Gary, yes. So that passes unanimously. All right. Okay, on to next new business is discuss town goals for FY23 and beyond and take any necessary action to adopt mutually agreed upon goals. So let me start off then quick and say that, we've been in a 2+ year process of really rebuilding the select board and trying to define the relationship between the select board and other committees and with the town administrator. So, and we've certainly gained a lot from Lauren Goldberg's expertise as town council and of course from Tom as well. So 3 points today is see how we're going to define the role of the select board, start developing this year's objectives, and take a look at long-range projects. And then the last thing is I think we need to, as we're going to have a transition on the 23rd of May, I know that Tom has pretty much cleared the slate as to a lot of the back projects and work is complete. So Steve will be able to start off pretty fresh on most items, but I think we ought to just see if we can come up with initial guidance as to what we would want him to look at on the first couple of months here on the job, besides, getting up to speed. And we're looking up front here, we're looking to wrap this up at 11:40 because we got to all get up to town hall. And the last F there, future workshops want to be in person. So been in communication with Dr. Ting on the Board of Health, and they will address that issue at their end of May Board of Health meeting as to the status of in person. And Tom, I know, has been advised us that currently the governor's authority or authorization for virtual meetings runs out on 15 July. So one way or another, the state or we need to decide how to take care of that. All right. So we all three have the packet. The packet is mostly the work of Tom and the staff over the last 2 years, and taking a look, and Diane certainly as town clerk and now on the board has a good look at inside operation of town hall. I'm not sure that we will get too deep into the details today on any one subject. And as we go through and setting our priorities, I think we need to remember that the limitations that we have in town hall as far as staffing and time available. And certainly on some of these things, although we discuss it today, that we really need to get Steve on board when he comes in. All right, so we'll go around first. Diane, any initial comments or direction you're looking for today?
No, actually, I was wondering how we were going to work on it today. We all sent in our objectives for today's meeting and our thoughts on different things. Nice music. And I think what we have here is a culmination that Tom put it all together with. There's some repetition and whatnot, but I think it's I'm not sure how you want to go forward with it, but I like it.
All right, Peter?
Pretty much the same as Diane.
All right. So let's take up A first, and I can talk through the what I think is a multitude of policies that will, by detail, identify how the select board works. And this started a couple years ago. We got some done. The first priority was the code of conduct, which is approved. We've gone through 2 annual select board reorganizations, and we've sort of done that on previous verbal agreements and tradition, but probably need to put that in writing. Each chair, I think, has developed their own cycle on the meeting preparation. And I think, that's one that we certainly need to get Steve involved in. But from what I've seen in the past is that we need to find some way for the other 2 select board members to have a formal input into the agenda, as well as, the chairman setting it. And also, as we get down further, to decide what they really need in the packet to come to decisions on things. Number 4 is select board versus or in cooperation with the town administrator, defining responsibilities there. Over the last year, Peter, we had some discussions on that, relying mostly on the job description for the town administrator. But I'm thinking that as we have a new town administrator come on board, we really need to define who's doing what in some close detail. Number 5, the calendar. Thank you to Michelle. So if you 2 have looked at the calendar, what we're trying to put together is a full year calendar that can be turned over to the next year. So to reduce the workload on the executive assistant, so that all the recurring items will be preloaded in, and the agenda items can be done at Michelle's leisure rather than waiting for that week's meeting with the chair. And it will also give us a place to put in the agenda tasks so that if something comes out of a meeting, it will go onto the calendar for either the second reading or for the vote, or we'll put in, if it's a longer project, we can put milestones in to the calendar. So that's work in progress, and we welcome inputs on that. Goal setting process. So we're going through one today, and I think we'll do a critique afterwards. And then that's something that we ought to have down in writing as well. One that we might stop now and talk about is I've labeled just as management information system. In the past, we've had the packet that comes, and most of the information is focused on the individual items coming up for a vote or discussion at that time. However, I've found, and we'll hear what you think, the select board does not have access to the bigger picture information. We've not had financial reporting. We have not had project management reporting. And so let me turn that over to you. In your packet, I think there is 8 or 9 possibilities, and whatever else you think as to, how and what information do you feel you need to get as a select board member? Over to you, Diane.
So we're.
So under A,
Yep,
number
number 8. Yep.
yes.
Okay. So just going down this list, I think is awesome. I think the bottom line is that we want to have more information from our departments and our committees. And so I think that there's a variety of ways you could do that. We could set up assigned liaisons to those committees, or we could have a calendar of reporting through the committees to us, written or in person, always allowing for impromptu reports if something's coming up that the water commissioners have to speak to us and we bring it on an agenda. So I think what we've done in Wenham is most of it has been siphoned through the town administrator, which I think is the right way to go. But if it's a little bit more scheduled, and then it's not so much on the TA's office as well, if we know we're going to hear from committee A, B, and C in March and D, E, and F in April, then unless there's an emergency, it can be more streamlined, I think.
Peter, you're a big corporate guy. What the reports would you expect as executive? You're muted.
I guess I'd like to see, just from a financial standpoint, like halfway through the month, you get a financial report on how the previous month did and year to date.
Right. Yeah, we've
And some, we used to call them due tos. So where the variances are, what's it due to? Is it timing or is it real?
Because of, due to, DUE. I
yes,
couldn't figure out it took me a little bit to figure that one out. Okay,
right. Good.
so
Got
that's
that noted.
every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we need a finance report, or are you thinking monthly?
No, monthly. So like two weeks after the month is closed, or however long it takes for the Demi, I guess, to crank the report. I also think we need to separate the financials so that it's operating and then capital. And I think capital will probably be one of those things that'll be big projects that'll require milestones and some level of are we spending more? Are we spending less?
All right. So I think certainly I know Jamie already plans to meet with Steve when he comes on board to develop that sort of thing as to financial reports, both expenses and income, so that both the select board and the FinCom can have an idea as we go through the year how things are progressing. And I've talked with Tom, and Tom has suggested too that the audit cycle and the certification of free cash and so forth, that we need to work with Jamie and Steve to see, what date lines we need to get those done so that we get the information before we move into the full budget cycle for the next year.
TA Steve or Steve Assessor?
No, TA Steve.
TA
Right.
Steve.
Steve, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And of course, yeah, the assessors too,
Mhm.
certainly that's where the money comes from. And I think Tom has worked that we're just about at the agreement for the new assessor setup. So we'll be working that. I think that's on the Tuesday. Yeah, the Wednesday, sorry,
Wednesday, yeah.
Wednesday meeting.
Oh,
All right.
Good. That's
All right.
great.
So,
So I have
anything else?
questions then.
yep.
Oh,
go.
sorry. Go ahead, Pete. Do you have
No, go.
anything else?
No,
So on that list, though, I had two questions. Like I didn't understand what the access to list of decisions and all staff committees meeting
yes.
were options, and I didn't know what they meant, so I didn't know.
So
What
I saw access to listed decisions is, I think the select board, along with the town administrator, need to have a ongoing roster of items that we decided to do and what the status of them is, or the same thing in votes. To draw up this list, you had to wade through a year's worth of minutes to go back and find, when did we approve the code of conduct? When did we do this and so forth? So I think
see.
we need to have some sort of,
spreadsheet.
spreadsheet, a list that says, these are the decisions that the select board has taken in FY 23, 23-1,
Got it.
3,
Yep.
whatever. something like
Okay.
that. And then the other on the all staff committee meetings, I'm thinking, do we want at the start of a year to get, all the committees or all the chairmans or some way and to kind of lay out a plan for the coming year? We've got the budget in place coming out of town meeting, but in a June or July timeframe, do we need to, talk to each other, board and committee wise? Because my impression in the past is the select board has often not heard from other committees until February or January, when they come in and go, oh yeah, we're planning to spend 25,000 on this or that or the other thing. So just an idea.
So that could be in their reports, or if we decide to go with liaisons or something like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's,
so
it's
there's
just to
multiple-
be in communication with all the committees
Yeah,
somehow.
several methods there. All right.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on number 8?
Tom has his hand up.
Yep, Tom.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. I'm
Yep.
going to be missing putting my hand up in a week or so. Just real quick comments, because I know you want to go through this. On the policy book, the entire policy book should be reviewed and codified, because I was going through it again this week and looking for things, and sometimes through good efforts, a lot of this is a treasure hunt that you're looking through, trying to find the proper areas where that item might be listed because of the wording that you may use instead of a general term. So it should be reviewed. I'd also review is whether all your policies are legal, so to speak. Because some of these go back well beyond before Diane, before Peter, before Gary, and it should be probably reviewed with town council on implementation of some of the policies that you have there. But as Diane was saying, it needs to be basically straight. The book is good, but also having it online. I've seen, and I put policy books online. It's good for the public to know what's going on, but it should be a full review when you do it and not piecemeal, because it's a process where you keep changing. To Peter's comment, which is very good, which I would love to do if I was back here full time, but I was always being brought in as kind of like the baseball reliever. So I never really started the game. I always came in the middle and the end. The policy is very good for the select board through the town administrator to at least get a quarterly financial review. Monthly you can do too, but at least quarterly, not just expenditures, but revenues, to know where you're coming in. And then to have the TA along with the finance director to be able to alert the finance committee and the select board where there's areas where we're in very good shape, and there are areas that we need to put a yellow flag or a red flag on going forward. Capital budgeting, big issue with me my entire career. Very supportive of capital budgeting, but long-term capital budgeting, and working with our departments and maybe even a capital budgeting committee to be moving forward starting in August on a 5-year capital plan. I know Steve has done that in Marblehead. His capital budget looks good there. And if he could bring that toward Wenham, that would be a fantastic help working with our departments on that. Because if you looked at the items that came in on the opera report that you received a couple of weeks ago, a lot of those items generally should be put into a capital budget, an ongoing capital budget. And the board is entirely correct, Peter, and you are too. You are part of the board, I'm sorry. The board is correct, is that capital budgeting is something that they really should be looking at going forward.
Yes, Diane.
So as far as the policy book, I'm happy to reformat or take, if we have it in a Word document, I'm happy to just reformat it, get it into a easy read, and bring it back to the board to review, add to whatever before we send it to legal, if you guys are up for that.
Peter?
Have at it, Di.
Right. Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, as Tom says, when we initially went through it way back, there are policies from 2000 and before. So I think it was just sequential. Something new came up, they just put it in the back of the book and added. So you got it, Diane. It's all yours.
I'll see what I
Okay.
can do. So
All right.
Tom and Michelle, maybe you can just shoot that off to me at some point.
All right, going forward then, appointments policy, we approved last 29 June 21. We probably need to review that coming up to the appointment season here. Reread it so we know what we're supposed to be doing. Not a review of the,
Right, okay, yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I don't think we need to redo it. We
Yeah.
should just review.
yeah. And then communications is an area that certainly, as we saw with the turkeys or, late select board controversies, we really right now have no policies on talking to the media as to who would do it, press releases and so forth. So that whole area of communications, as well as other stuff. I know Michelle has reworked an internal notification roster for snow closures and stuff, but both the small communications and the big communications is an area that needs to be covered too.
So I'd be more than, so just so you know, one of my really good Gillette buddies was on the select, he was chairman of the select board of, oh my God, Walpole. And he's also a communications guy. I can just ask him, what do you got off the shelf?
Sounds good. There's no need to duplicate work if they're volunteering to give us the material. So thank you, Peter. And then the last one, that group, and looks like you two have taken tasks. So I'll take the last one if you want. Number 20 is committee charge documents. So much like the policy books, our committee charges are just a historical list. One was written one way, one was written another. Some are for different terms, some are for different sizes and stuff. So that's one thing that we probably need to look at to standardize how we put the committee charges out there.
Meaning the charges to the committees that we form?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So, there's a couple that are by bylaws, such as, FinCom, but most of them are just, such and such committee was made up in 1990 And at that time, they decided this and that. And then 20 years later, here's another committee. And, you know, if we, at least the format of the charges ought to be the same so that there's a tasking, a composition, and so forth on the document. So the public and other people can see how they're supposed to be structured. Yes, Tom?
Right, this, whoops, sorry, lower that. Right, this is more a question for Diane in history in her role as town clerk, and maybe Trudy. I see Trudy's on there. Have we, over the years, when we had temporary committees, formally disbanded them when their tasks were done, or are they still technically on the books?
I think some are disbanded and some might just have disintegrated.
Okay,
I don't think they're still on the books, but Trudy can probably see if I'm missing anybody.
I agree with that. I think there's still some that's on the books that probably should be disbanded.
All right.
And maybe make that a policy going forward, that once the committee's done, there should be a formal vote to disband it.
Yeah, certainly probably for temporary committees, the charge itself ought to have a termination date or something that would work as well.
Yeah.
All right. So if Trudy can take a look at that, and is there anything else on select board policy book and that whole area?
Well, I think we're
Yes,
missing
Trudy.
the policy. Oh, go ahead.
Trudy?
What am I taking a look at?
Uh,
I was wondering.
if you have any information on what committees were created but were never formally disbanded.
Okay, so I sat down with Tom and Michelle last week and we went through the appointment list. So there were a couple of committees on that list that we could probably look at.
Okay.
And if I also might add at this point, if you don't mind, working with Tom, I have put together a handbook for boards and committees that I will be prepared to start giving out July 1st as their annual appointment. So I don't know at some point if the charges can be updated and put into that book, or if it's just a separate document on its own. But the handbook that I'm prepared to give out just talks about the basics, and it's got all of the requirements in there that a board or committee has to do as far as ethics, open meeting law, and things like that.
Sounds great. And I think that's further down on our list. So we can check that one off already. Yes, the handbook for committees. Thank you, Trudy.
Thanks.
All right.
Can you,
So
can you share that with us as well, since we're a
yeah.
board and committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd
Thank
be
you.
happy to.
Yep. All right. So
So Gary, I had one more thing on
yes.
A.
Yep.
Which I think should be like the first thing on policy book. Number one would be the mission or the objective of the Board of Selectmen. I'm sorry, Select Board.
Yeah. So our own job description,
Yes.
basically. Yep.
Charge or mission,
Yep,
what
yep.
you want to do, but that should be the first thing that's in there.
All right.
Yeah.
So then,
So I have
So-
this. And it pretty much calls out.
And that is the MMA thing.
yeah. Yeah. So good reference there for all of us. All right. Anything on else on defining our own job? We've got 3 tasks. Each of us picked up one there. All right. How about, are we ready to move on to B, the current year's objectives? Yes, yes. All right. So let's, Tom, if you could go through just current status
okay, sure.
on legislative Longfellow classification, ARPA, so forth.
Right,
If you got the next slide up there, Michelle.
sure. Okay. First, on the legislative hearing, as you all saw yesterday, they technically, whoops. Oh, okay, she's putting up the slide. Okay, thank you. They're technically not having a public hearing on this and a number of other items. The Joint Committee on Municipal Government and Regional Governments. They're just taking written, not even testimony, written support from the communities. And you were notified, 3 members were notified yesterday of getting information to us so we can put together a consolidated letter by next Thursday. I know Diane submitted it to me this morning. I appreciate that. I'll just wait from Gary and Peter. If you want to add anything, we can put together a draft letter for your review on that. That will go from the committee to the Senate for vote and eventually to the House. More than likely, it will be done in the fall. And then we go through the process of bringing it back to the voters. And then if the voters pass it, ultimately to the 2 vacant seats. But that's where the status is at this point. Longfellow Road, Rich and I have been working with the abutters, particularly through Linda Medeiros, and we were supplying her with some additional information yesterday on this project, and we're hoping to come to some type of an agreement so we can be ready and in line for the betterments. But we're still working on that. Be happy to talk to any member who has a question of where we are at this point. But we had submitted some additional information that Linda had some questions on behalf of the residents. But we are optimistic that we'll be coming to a conclusion on this very shortly. Route 1A project, generally in the hands of the state at this point. There's been no real serious movement on it. The last thing we had was recently, almost about a year ago, with me was some discussions about walls and fences. But Rich is working on that with the state, and Rich had confirmed with me right now that there has been no further movement at this point. And generally, no disrespect to Mass DOT, but sometimes your expected dates of projects get moving forward for various reasons.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, is this the light at Arbor and Cherry?
That's part of it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, a sub item here, I think Gary had put down here, was how to remove wires. Generally, that's an interesting concept. They don't generally try to remove the wires because it's very expensive. It also involves right-of-way issues. For burying it, I support it 100% because it's better for the wires so they're not affected by weather and such. But it's also pricey. There are ways where the town can look to have the state fund it. It doesn't happen that often. We were successful when I was in North Reading back in the 90s. We're on a historic district downtown. We were able to get state funding to relocate and place underground wires. I'm not certain that there is an appetite for that right now with the legislature, but Steve can always look forward to the legislature of possibly doing that in the future. Wage classification study, we've gone through Ryan's material, we've accepted the award, and they should be starting very shortly on
Who?
that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Who
So
was it? Of the HR USA.
HR USA.
Yeah.
About this Route 1A project, I mean, I've seen images of what it's going to look like. I mean, is this something we have to do? Because I mean, it looks like hell. I mean, it's really going to be ugly.
I have not, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
Peter, I have not really been that involved in it because there hasn't been that involvement with the state with us in recent months.
So who's driving this?
So it's originally a previous select board request to the state for
Mhm.
the design and agreement to that design phase. But certainly, yes, you know, the fire department has worked with a designer on some issues they had as to access and ability to depart out of the fire department. But yes, anyone that's taken a look at the design, it's going to be a major impact, especially at the Arbor Main Street intersection with the I believe 24-foot poles and up to 8 to 10 lights.
I mean, it's brutal.
Yep.
I mean, it's gonna be like, in terms of,
It's a
I mean,
Boston solution, not a Wenham solution.
it is.
Yep.
So how do we, you know, have
There,
at least open a discussion about
Right.
what, do we really want to do this?
Yeah. So, Tom, if I remember correctly, the DOT will have a public hearing and the sequence down the line here.
It's my understanding they're only at what you call the 25% phase of design.
Yeah.
They're not even close to being at full design phase. But they would be having a public hearing, correct?
So I just want to mention also that it was brought to the Board of Selectmen from residents. I
Right.
mean, it is a terrible stretch of highway that needs to be fixed with the amount of traffic that goes through. Again, with only being 25% done, what the end result is may or may not look like what they're talking about now. So I think we should just kind of sit and wait for it, and then have our say when it happens.
So Peter, do you want to take on some of the interest on this and
Sure.
see if we can find out what methods we can influence the end product?
So who do I talk to in the town?
The
No
best-
one, I think it's with the state. There's nothing we can do right now.
I would speak with, actually, I would speak with Rich just for technical aspects of it. The other ways you can work on this, Peter, is specifically with our state legislators on this. I used to have connections with DOT, my Mass DOT connections. No longer with this administration. So I would start first with Rich to get on the technical aspects of it, Rich Souza.
Thank you.
So back to you, Tom, I guess, for ARPA and joint assessors structure.
Right. APA, you have your information. I think it's up to the board at this point to determine what process they would like to go through on these items. Whether the board wants to or doesn't feel it's needed to create an APA committee to review these items, or if the board wishes to do it themselves. We're a small community, board's call. I would recommend, as I previously, that there is at least a public discussion on these items with your department heads, and the public at large, if the public has any ideas. 3 is when you look at these items, is determine kind of like a 1, a 2, and a 3. 1, if it's a need, or 2, it's a want. And items of how this affects the community on long term. Iron Rail has, I think, about $1.3 million in requests there. I think the board should have a general discussion about what the future of Iron Rail would be before you intend to put that amount of money into the project. But that's just me speaking, not for the board. So I think on all these items, you look at what the need is and the implementation of it. On that, you have one of the items was, I think, about almost $250,000 for de-leading the firing range in the fire station and possibly other uses of it as office space. I think you have to seriously look into, okay, what's the plan? If you're spending $250,000 and you're doing offices, what kind of offices? What are they used for? Is it a want or is it need? Do we need that office space, or is it just, it would be nice to have it? So I think you should look at these seriously, because they're really capital projects and you don't need to spend all this money immediately. There may be some other uses going down the road a year from now. So I think look at these very carefully, make your approvals based on what you think is best for the town. But I think we're at the process now where it should be going before with the Board of Select Board. Next, if there's any, I don't know if there are any questions on that one before going to the assessors. That agreement is on your agenda for the shared services agreement for this Wednesday evening. And then once approved, we can go forward with the joint group about advertising and appointing the various positions that are involved in the shared services. The plus about this is we're hoping that because of having increased staffing on that, we can improve determinations of new growth. We can pick up items that we were not picking up before on valuation and such. And I think this is going to be a good program going forward. So Wednesday, it's on your agenda for the approval of the agreement as approved by town council.
Questions, Diane or Peter?
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
No.
Oh, and the one thing also, I'm sorry, Gary, I failed to answer.
Yep.
We added into the agreement that it would be reviewed again after 3 years to determine if we want to keep, if we want to be the lead community versus the town of Hamilton. So I had that added into it.
Thank you.
That's in line with our process on the inspections too, the flip-flop back and forth options. So
Yeah.
that's good. All right, so that pretty much, got to say thank you to Tom. As you can see, he's cleared a lot of the backlog projects, and these few listed here are, either very long-term or just about to get to some sort of closeout or contract done. So, and we'll get ARPA on the agenda coming up here on one of our meetings. All right. Other new items as we work down here is if you'd like to talk about finances, things I've seen over the past couple of years is that we really need to look at our investment policy. That certainly as we go into a new period of inflation or increased interest rates, we got to find some way to make better money off our investments and our money available. So we had the Powers and Sullivan had the briefing a while back, but we can look at breaking out trust funds and other accounts that could be invested at a higher rate of return. So that's that one. Idea, next one, select board budget directive. Prior to going into the whole budget season, there ought to be perhaps a select board directive or guidance as to where we really want to go with the budget for the next year. So up to this date, it's been pretty much each department, takes last year's budget, figures out what else they want to add on and comes up with a number. But there's really never been a policy to start the whole process from the top down, telling the departments and committees and so forth of, this is how much money we expect, where do we want to put the emphasis? Is it's going to be on DPW this year because the roads had a bad winter, or is it on a capital project or whatever? So that's just an idea to have a kickoff select board budget directive. Tom's already mentioned a need for a capital budget long-term planning, and we'll get that with Steve on.
Excuse me, Gary.
Yep.
Can we take down the screen share so we could just see each other? Because no one
Okay,
can
yes,
read what's
yeah,
up there
that's good.
anyway.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right,
Sorry.
the department inventory, I think if on kind of the business finance side of the town, how do you really know what you need if you don't know what you already have on the shelf? And if I was to ask Peter or Diane, how many trucks do we have or how much equipment do we have? That information really doesn't reside anywhere other than maybe in the department chief's head or, on his little crib sheet. So that's something we might look at. As we've seen, we've had some great success, especially Margaret getting grants. So perhaps we need to work as a select board to find some way to have dedicated staff time to go out and find the grants. Certainly Tom, with his encyclopedic knowledge of municipalities, has done this, but we need to find some way to go out and find them money.
I may actually have a little startup that's actually creating a way for people who have grants or granting grants, and the people who need them, and creates a marketplace. So
All
it's
right.
much easier to find.
Tom has his hand up.
Yep. Tom, yes.
Thank you. Just 10 seconds going back to department inventory. We do have the inventory of all our vehicles because it's required annually for insurance purposes. So that's readily available, and IT should have our inventory of our IT equipment. So if you're talking about physical equipment, we have generally an okay item on that, particularly the vehicles.
Right. Sounds good, Tom.
Thank you.
But so Gary, I think you're saying that we should have access to that, or should be aware of that on an annual basis, you wanted to see?
Yeah, so I
have
think,
that on the
perhaps not so much for select board, but I see it also for FinCom starting off, put the inventory along with the capital planning, and you need that basic information to know whether the next dump truck or the next cruiser or whatever is really needed. Right?
Okay.
And that goes down to the lower level. I know Michelle just these past couple of weeks have been working on just how many telephones are there, right? And you know that one, Diane. So
There's a lot.
yeah.
Gary,
Yes,
telephone issues happens in all towns.
I know. Yep.
Yeah, but on the inventory, and I'm sure Steve will be doing this, and this is usually a summer project. When you start beginning a full-blown capital budget report request project for that, starting generally in August, you include the inventory.
Right.
So when the board here would get, and the finance committee gets their capital budget report, it will list the trucks, the cars, their life cycles. Usually life cycles of fire trucks are 20 to 25 years. And the capital budget would have when you should be putting those up for purchase going forward.
All right. So.
And if
yeah,
I could
so-
jump in with the grants, to go back to your grant thing, I think that would be one thing that I would kind of expect from the TA's office.
Right.
So from what Tom has done, I think that would be a good objective for our new TA.
Right. We'll mark that in there. On insurance, Tom and I have had, not on insurance itself, but I think the select board may need to look at our various liabilities in certain areas, certainly both on the personnel issues, but also, litigation is ever getting greater as far as, our EMTs, make sure that they're covered. Our police rotation, access to the police, make sure that the public has that, as well as, we'll get down later, make sure we have coverage if we're going to have policies that determine how public lands or property are going to be used. We need to make sure that our insurance covers that as well. So that's, I think, one for TA. All right, master planning, we just passed that, and we know planning board has that. Some other policies that I think were partially or missing from the policy book is the legal, and certainly we got to say again, thank you to Tom for getting us transitioned over from an hourly rate to a retainer setup, which seems to be going to provide us with quite a cost savings. We've had several requests over the last year or so of public events. So there's a draft document out there, but I think we need to have a policy on that so that people are treated equally, that it does not put a cost burden or a time burden on the town or on the town staff. and that, you know, we make sure it does not become a competitive process between outside groups that, you know, perhaps limits the one day, or will define what can be done. So ideas on that, Peter, Diane, Tom, got your hand up?
Yeah, just on this, and this is very important that the board look at that, because this is becoming a general issue statewide with various communities regarding on use of town property, use of flagpoles, seriously.
Yeah, the Boston flagpole last week.
Yeah, not just Wenham, but generally statewide, and use of properties for events. So it's something, you're absolutely right, that you seriously need to look at and have a document drafted up that covers all these items, so they do not become an issue for the select board in the future.
That also raises a insurance issue as well.
Yes.
Most definitely, yes, because you know, the not only is it a flag up the flagpole, but we'll probably have to address, you know, use of parks. You know, if we're putting in tennis courts, pickleball courts, and so forth, need to check the insurance liability on that, and how we're going to determine access or fair access to all those facilities. All right. Human resources, you know, we've made some progress there with a few policies, but you know, I think somehow we need to find staff expertise or designate, other than health, which is you know, in the finance department, but for the bigger, broader HR, we got to find a solution as the Wenham grows a little bit bigger, and that we clearly have more tasking from state and federal government as to making sure we have these policies in place.
You definitely need staff expertise. No disrespect to anyone here. You could probably, no, it's not probably, you can get away with a part-time 10-hour person, maybe not, maybe 10 hours for the week, a couple days a week working here. But it is something that is really needed.
Is that potentially something that could be shared with Hamilton?
That's a discussion that the board and the town and Steve and Joe can have regarding if you want to do that.
Hamilton is currently in a regional HR contract with Manchester and Rockport.
Yeah. You can, you know, it can be discussed. I'm not that familiar with their regional, you know, their regional program. I've used them just for a posting or two. But the key is like on some day-to-day operations and activities, contract interpretation, contract implementation, various leave policies and such. You really need to have somebody who has experience in that, looking at that and being able to make a decision or review in a short period of time versus constantly sending it out to town council to review.
All right. So anything else on HR, Diana, Peter? All right, we know it's a shortfall we need to cover pretty quick here. IT, you know, we have joined the consortium, but somehow we need to have a point of contact, or again, like HR, we need some expertise in-house, at least to translate our needs to the consortium and to come back and put those into contract form or purchase orders to what we need. So,
do we still contract with Micro Support? Are they our IT people?
yes.
But we need some, you're saying maybe someone in-house?
Well, I'm not sure we need a IT person in-house, but I see the need for someone in-house to have at least some expertise, so that when some other employee comes and says, you know, my computer's not working, you know, that we can translate that into work orders or a contact to expertise, or someone that has sufficient knowledge that we can keep the our system going internally.
Mm.
All right, so 14 there, project management policy. I think just say the word Longfellow, and that shows that we need to have some sort of policy as to what we accept, attempt to do, or decline, and how we're actually going to do things like that. Tom, do you want to speak for a minute about you've started the initiative on emergency management with a couple of department heads?
Certainly. Great, thank you. We've always had an emergency management program, a management committee. I don't believe when I've met with them a few times already this year, is they're very supportive. Our emergency management team currently is police and fire, the two chiefs, the deputies, DPW director. Technically, it should probably be expanded to the COA director for Jim Reynolds to be involved in that. I've been really supportive of this wherever I've been, because when something happens, the public needs to have confidence in the community to quote, they know what they're doing. And in Stoneham, we've had some water issues. Also, yeah, I'm sorry, Eric Mansfield needs to be on that. Water issues regarding allegations of the water not being pure, so to speak. In Belmont, I'm dating myself, but if you remember when they had that huge water break in Weston, the main MWRA water break, and a lot of the MWRA communities did not have water for a week, 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Belmont was one of the few towns, because we were prepared to be able to give water out to the residents, which I would never want to be involved in that again, being the lines and asking for IDs and such. You have to be aware of if you have a major fire, how do you handle that? What do we do in something that isn't a fire? You have a heat wave. What do we do with residents, or particularly seniors, who don't have AC and they need a place to go if you're up in the hundreds for like 5 straight days? So we're working on that right now. I've got them, they're involved in that. They're very excited about it. Also is to have tabletop exercises. And that's how you plan, is you have an exercise. Okay, we have a situation where,
The gas line explodes on Cherry Street.
Yeah, gas line, okay. That
Oh, boy.
explodes. Okay, or,
I talked to Stephen about that.
yeah,
When we were driving around, there's right behind Crosby's, there's that big gas that comes out and then goes back into the ground. And he said that like a couple of years ago, they did a real exercise there that he said it was one of the most complicated but amazing tabletop exercises ever done.
and it's, our emergency management direction comes out of the fire department. That's great. I'm not recommending changing that, because that's where the place it should be, is in public safety, police or fire. I've had it in the past in one community where the emergency management director was a citizen, and we really needed them at that point. And they were totally out of state. So basically, we had to put it together ourselves for this particular issue. So I think you've got the core set up very well. And I think if they keep working with this, you're in fine shape. I mean, some of the situations, we don't have a major downtown, so we don't necessarily have to worry as much about that. But those issues, I think in particular with the seniors, we need to really start looking at addressing, is that if areas of emergency, involve them, we have to basically, deal with that. And that's why I think it's good to get Jim involved going forward.
Trudy, I see your hand up.
If you don't mind, I think along the same lines, we also need to consider cybersecurity. There's cyber attacks all the time, more and more on municipalities. We also need to, I did a class many years ago at a clerk's conference. It was on essential documents, and all of us in our departments have essential documents. We need to make a list. Each department needs to make a list. If, something comes through town hall and destroys town hall, whether it's a flood or a fire, what essential documents does each department have, and what will we need to get the town back up and running again? So I think those are some other things that at some point we all need to be looking at.
Right.
Thank you,
Noted.
Trudy, absolutely right. The other item to do, and this somewhat backs up with what Trudy is saying, is one thing that this town should be looking at in the capital budget. Because I've always said, when I leave a community, I leave you with two things: a turf field and an emergency generator for town hall. I don't think I'm getting the turf field yet at the high school, but you are definitely in need of an emergency generator at town hall to cover such things, Trudy, to keep us operationally running and things go down, and also basically to save things, and we don't want to lose things. And I've worked at putting on that, and I think that should be something that, if it's not addressed by our facilities department, the board should really look into it in your upcoming capital budget of putting one in here.
Got it. All right.
And I have worked with historic districts, so we're emergency generators in historic districts, so I know how to hide it.
All right.
So if it's
A colonial emergency generator, right?
it's a colonial fence, Gary.
Yes, colonial fence. All right. Anything on that, Peter or Diane? Emergency?
Well, does fire and police have emergency generators for their facilities?
I believe they
Yes.
do, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do they have excess capacity?
That's something we can look at.
Yeah.
At this point, it would also involve, cabling under to there. I'm gonna take a guess that it may not be. It may have been just, the generator may have been just, if they have that, it may have been just for that size facility. But, that can be looked at going through in August when you're looking at your capital budget.
All right. So number 16 there, committee chairman handbook. So Trudy's already got that one fairly well checked off, and we'll take a look at that. But I think one aspect we need to look at that is they are volunteers, but I think committee chairmen need to understand that there's certain administrative workload there that we really can't be expending high wage level for town employees to do some routine stuff as far as filing a paperwork or sending the agenda into town clerks or whatever. So thank you, Trudy, for that.
So I think Trudy said she's doing a committee handbook, which is
Yeah.
awesome, but maybe, because I never did this in mine until Gary just said that too, is to put the specific responsibilities of the chair
There,
as included in the handbook.
right.
I'm happy to send it out to you. I think it's pretty well finalized, but if you have tiny comments you'd like to make, they'll be welcomed, but I'm not sharing it for you guys to totally rewrite, because
All right.
Tom and I have both looked at this. It's a document that I used in Linfield many years ago. So I'm happy to share it. I'm happy to take some edit comments.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, Tom.
This is more the Trudy if she wants to sign back on, but she can probably still. If there's any questions on the, policy book for the tax write-off program, if you want, your call. If you want to get in touch with Sue up in North Reading, I worked on writing one up there like 20 years ago. I don't even know if it's still in place, but there was a pretty good book that we put together with the then select board and the town clerk and such in North Reading. But your call if you're interested. But
All right.
I'm sorry, what's the book about?
the
Senior
tax
tax
write-off, the tax
Oh.
senior, yeah, because when we adopted it back in North Reading when it first came out, we literally had people waiting in line to get on the program. So we had to create a policy book about how it operates, how we choose. as Gary was talking about how department heads or committees and boards utilize it. But I don't even know if it's still up there, but we did utilize, we did have a
Let,
policy book on that.
let's turn that over to Jim Reynolds.
Mhm.
Yeah, so, and that leads right into number 17. Next thing, you know, we've had, especially pre-pandemic, we had a lot of volunteers and tax write-off citizens working in town hall otherwise, but I don't think, I have never found the policy as to who does what, who recruits who, and how that works. So that's one we will.
There is one. There is
Is
one.
there?
Yeah,
Alright.
it's usually it's through the treasurer and the council on aging
All right, so we'll,
together, but there is a process and
Alright.
and requirements and stuff.
we'll track that down.
I think it was on the
And-
website too,
Right.
actually.
18, I know this is one of Tom's favorites too, that, you know, getting a rational capital planning process that also includes real property management. And I know Mike Hardy is onto this too, but the other aspect of select board policy on use of streets, parks, trees, monuments, and so forth. So, you know, how do we organize, authorize people to use the parks, block parties, monuments on public property in memory and so forth. So that's something that probably needs to be codified in some place, as
Naming
well as,
policies.
yeah,
Naming policies, that's, I've been through that without a policy, that's, the board should have that about if somebody wants to name a park, a room, a basketball court, whatever.
all right. And I think Peter's interested in this one, number 19, you know, green community, climate change, resource conservation, that whole area. We've got, you know, a couple committees working on that. And we have Vicky Masson works on the energy conservation and so forth. But I see that is something that planning board, master planning needs to kind of fold that into the town going forward. Yes, Peter? Muted.
Dog was barking.
Yeah.
So the note that Bob Knoll sent to you, I sent to Margaret and to share it with Ann Weeks so she
Right.
understands that. Okay, that's all I
Okay.
wanted.
Yeah, and we'll, they're on for Wednesday night as well. We'll get a presentation on that as well. And then 21 is aims at ATM and elections. And Trudy does a great job, and Diane before doing the elections. But this is more on, you know, documenting the staff preparations for town meeting, so that this year and last fall, you know, to avoid the scramble of, you know, Nikki and Jackie knew how to do it, but, you know, how do we do it today? So I think that's a policy or more of a lesson learned that we need to get down in writing as to how we handle major events. Comments?
Great idea.
All right. Then I know Jim Reynolds is working on this, but senior citizen services, you know, we're trying to rationalize with Hamilton, perhaps not get to the merger or shared yet, but rationalize as to, you know, certainly we have a lot of experience on the van service. Hamilton has a lot of experience on the meals preparation and so forth. So I know Jim is working on that, and an area that we need to work with a perhaps the Affordable Housing Trust, now that we've got the full Maplewoods now, is to look at a either smaller scale or individual assistance we can provide to seniors as to house modifications or making them affordable and so forth. So that probably a longer term one, and we can work with other committees on. Peter or Diane, anything you want to add to that list of current topics?
I think that's a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah, we're building a
Sure.
lot of work to do, but I think it's important.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so on to C, longer range projects. So under finance, Peter, I know you've been looking at tax-based commercial development, perhaps add in payments in lieu of taxes and vacant town properties. So you want to just give us a quick brief as to what you found so far?
In terms of areas for
Hmm.
commercial development,
That or, our excess town properties?
well, working with Steve-O, and also with Tom. And Tom wisely told me early on that towns actually, what they really do poorly is manage the property they own. And and I was also talking to Steve earlier this week, and he mentioned, oh yeah, the town actually owns a lot on Topsfield Road. I have no idea why we own that. And given what's been going on with the real estate prices, might be a good time to dump. So I went on to the assessor's tool, got all the list of town-owned properties and ranked it by value. And I just came up with 8 of them. And these are the number 1 was actually Iron Rail. And the interesting thing about that, I don't think I can find it. Oh, so Iron Rail is, I don't know where this valuation comes from. It's worth like 3.3 million bucks. It's got 3.4 lot size, of which only 26K is actually finished. So it's just a big empty lot. Now, granted, a lot of that is fields, which we're never going to do anything about. But then they're just these, you up on Enon Road and Hilltop, they're just these, house, empty lot, house. And so like what? So evidently I'm going to get help from Steve. Margaret knows the history of a lot of these lots. And it's like, evidently some of them have been taken away from people who weren't paying their taxes. And evidently some of the, finding out who actually owns the property, or at least has a clear deed, is an issue. So I'm just going to kind of dig into that. The Iron Rail piece on commercial development, we talked about that last night at our planning meeting, and we're just going to let the master plan process go on, because there is a whole focus on economic development as part of that process.
Yes, Tom.
Peter is absolutely right. Particularly on the reviewing of town-owned lands. Done this in the past, and if I was here permanently, full-time, and going forward, this would be one of the programs I would be implementing. Annually, I work with the assessors of looking at what town-owned land is out there. And then eventually going back with the select board and the planning board and maybe the department that might oversee that property is, do we put it up for disposition? Given a point, I can't speak for Wenham, but I've run into this in other communities, whereas Peter's saying there are small pieces that literally go nowhere and they abut someone's personal lot. And they may even have been using that property for 15 years, not paying taxes on it and so forth. So basically, if it was like a small 500 square foot, 1,000 square foot of property, we put it up for sale. We see if the abutter wants to buy it. Plus on that, we get one-time revenue for the sale of property. Also, we get back on the tax rolls and we may be able to pick up a little piece of that revenue there. So Peter is absolutely correct. That should be reviewed with Steve coming on board. Steve is an assessor. He understands that process. I would probably, one of the future items for him to do is start the review of the process. Peter's absolutely correct.
So I'll keep shepherding that along.
All right.
But the one-time revenue, I mean, this could be an easy, just on the 7 properties that I listed there, there's probably $4 or $5 million just sitting there.
Wow.
That's certainly at today's rates, yes. If they build them, yeah. So the next item quick is iron rail. So, we've been using that as a cash cow for many years, anticipating or assuming that we're going to get the money in. And we've done sort of minor upkeep only on a as necessary emergency basis. So that's something that we need to sit down with the Iron Rail Commission and probably Mike Hardy and Steve and see, what the iron rail building, what's the future there? Do we invest more money? Do we move it off to a separate realtor management so that we get out of the actual day-to-day operation or what? So a big one and a pretty big ticket item, because Tom, I think you said, what, 1.3 million in identifiable
That's what I
expenses
believe
out
that's
there?
what Mike has
Yeah.
for APA about that.
Right. All right, next big one, and Tom may have some news on this. Interface with the school committee on the new school construction.
Okay, thank you. Met on it yesterday morning. They will be looking for, and we'll make an announcement Wednesday evening. They will be looking for members for the school building committee for the new project. And there are certain who are on there by mandate, but from the MSBA, such as Steve will be on. There'll be need to be a member of the select board, member generally of the finance committee. And then going forward, how many citizens at large, both Hamilton and Wenham, want to put on the committee. So that process will be beginning. They will be also looking at, and I was going to bring this up at the regular select board meeting, they will be looking at the communities to fund the feasibility study at an October town meeting. And generally, in our case, it's, I believe, October would be October 1st. They would like a Saturday, so that we go second, they go first. Funding of the project, it would probably be, the feasibility study would probably run us about $250,000 to $280,000 our share, the 1/3 share. There's various ways to fund it that can be discussed over the summer, but the key right now is looking to get members on the committee so that they can be appointed. I've been with and dealt with maybe 7 school building committees in my career. I haven't dealt with a regional one though. So of how that's appointed, who the appointment, how they do it. I mean, generally a school building committee would be if Wenham had their own school system, Wenham makes the appointment. And that's a question that I'm not sure how the answer is, how they do it on a regional basis. But they will be looking for members on that committee going forward.
And certainly over the next, 5 to 8 years, that's going to be the major expense for both towns. Clearly. All right, so got that news maybe more on Wednesday. I had put in, as we get down to long-term range considerations, is both the character of Wenham and our critical resources, watershed protection, historic preservation, open space, and so forth. So we have some committees on that, but long-term, hopefully through the master planning process will assist us in putting a path forward as to how we can preserve those things that we really value here in town. And the last one that I had was, how do we make available at least some affordable housing in town? So we're above our 10%, state target goal, but certainly going forward is going to be a continuing need. And if not affordable housing, or how do we shift our housing inventory to account for changing demographics and changing family structures in town? So just an idea going forward. Diane, Peter,
Do we have
long-term
to,
stuff?
yeah, do we have to, with the affordable housing, looking ahead, just getting a plan, we have to start thinking about that MBTA housing issue?
Yeah, the commuter rail, yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's something to think about too.
There was a article in the newspaper, I think last week, in the Globe about the commuter rail. A lot of pushback from the smaller communities as far as the very high minimums on units, whereas some towns that have multiple stations only have one quota to meet. So we'll see what that comes, but certainly master planning is going to have to take a look at that. All right, so cranking down on time here. So the next 10 minutes, Peter, Diane, what do you want Steve to focus on once he gets introduced around and feels comfortable in Tom's chair there? What do you see as the up top as the priorities?
Well,
Go ahead, Pete.
I'll go back to what Tom was going on about, is to go back and do a quick review of town-owned land. It's just low-hanging fruit just sitting there.
All right. Diane?
And I'd add the Longfellow, although it's moving along okay, we just want to make sure we don't end up in a bad spot this fall when we have to get those betterments out by November.
Right. And then certainly I think Steve will have to be involved in the policy book process to get everything administratively put together. And I think he'll have to take a look as to how to solve the HR and IT situation. Tom, any other suggestions?
Yes. Coming from somebody I was told by another manager this week, commenting about my age, said your generation. So I didn't realize I was a your generation person yet. What's important here in this position, coming from starting this in 81, is one of it is communication. That is very important, both to the boards, committees, select board, and particularly to the public, and is to keep them involved. If someone, not involved, let's say informed. If someone sends you an email, you respond to it by the end of the day. Even if you don't have the answer, acknowledge it. People like that because this has changed since I started in 1981. 1981, we did not have emails really, okay? People would send you a letter, you type it up, send it back. You could wait 3 or 4 days for them to get the letter. They would respond to you. So you had this gap of time period. Effectively now, someone can sit, not naming names, sit at their email, an email out at 2 in the morning, get to you. And if you're a resident, you're expecting a response at, literally almost simultaneously, immediately. So they want to hear from you. You have the access. So do that. Also, don't raise expectations if you can't do it. Deliver more than you stated, but don't state what you can't deliver. Don't say we can look into it, we will that, but also give reasons why you can't do something. If you're saying, well, we can't pave that road, not you can't pave that road because we don't want to. Give them the reasons. They don't want to hear something that isn't. Not hear a reason. Also work with the boards. Gary, Diane, and Peter don't want to be surprised. Okay? When I came here, both the first time and the second time, I said to the department heads, make sure that if you see something that I don't know about, think about it. If this is going to make Fox News, tell me. And I had Kevin, Chief Natalie, call me about, and I think I sent out to the board like 10 minutes later, on the prom issue. There was a Channel 5 truck down at the school department. And he said, oh, I remember what you told me. If I think something's going to be on the news, to tell you. So he did. I think I sent it out to all three of you within a matter of minutes, is don't get the board surprised. All right. Also, don't, to Steve, if you're out there listening, make sure if something's going wrong, inform the board, because, and with a possible solution. Because if the board is uninformed and they go down to Stop and Shop or Shaw's in Beverly, or they're in Crosby's in Hamilton, or to be local, the bagel shop downtown here, they hear it. You don't want to be the one saying, hey, Steve, Tom, why didn't you tell me about this? So in keeping the information going. Also, planning is very important, as Peter has brought up. Don't do things by this, seat of your pants. Plan it out, have a program, have a structure. And I think going forward, you'll be fine. I think we got a town back in good shape now. I think with this board, this is a good board. I think we're moving forward. I think all three members are looking forward and not looking just for particular issues. I think they're looking to move us into, 23. As I once said about a town, and I'm not saying this about Wenham. Wenham is good about this. I once said to a town, I'm going to bring you into the 1970s. Right now, you're already there. You're in 2022. Keep moving to 23 and 24. You're doing a good job. Keep the plan route going forward.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Peter, Diane, anything else as we get down to the deadline?
No, but I just want to say thank you, Tom.
No kidding. And maybe you should train future municipal employees.
No, this is probably my last gig, though. I said that 6 months ago.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Famous last words.
right, but no, it's been a pleasure, but I think you're on the right path right now. And just looking forward to seeing Steve and Michelle and all the department heads, like I said, moving to 2023.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And certainly need to say thank you. One of the reasons we got through these last 2 years of a bit of turbulence is the employees, and especially the department heads that have maintained high professional standards and kept the thing going. Otherwise, about to wrap it up here because we get to town hall by noon. But I think this morning we've seen all three of us, I think, are ready to pitch in and take on certain tasks. And I think over the next few months, as we get Steve on board, that we can really put down and get the processes in writing and make it a smooth flowing municipal government. Any last items, Peter?
I'm good.
Diane?
No, I'm fine.
All right.
Great job.
All right. So yes, so let's Tom, anything?
Nope, I have to go answer my emails now before
All
the
right, yes, yeah. All right. And Catherine, thanks as always for getting the minutes. And I know this will be kind of an extensive one, but we'll look forward to it because it's going to really document the road ahead for us. All right, then. A motion, Peter?
I motion that we end this meeting. I don't have a clock.
37?
11:37.
I second that.
All in favor?
Diane,
Places,
yes.
Peter, yes. Diane, yes. Gary, yes. It's unanimous. So thank you, everybody. And
Thank you.
we should quickly go over the schedule ahead. So remember Wednesday this week for the select board meeting. There's invitations that we've seen out there for attendance at the high school candlelight and graduation. We have Memorial Day coming up. Veterans Committee is working on a Flag Day event. And we have both, Diane, you're doing a Pride on the 1st. And we have Juneteenth on the 19th of June. So kind of a busy schedule coming up, as well as the regular select board meetings on the 7th and 21st of June. Did I miss anything in there? All right, enough to keep us busy. All
Oh,
right,
yeah.
all right. That's it
Take care.
then. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Bye,
All
everybody.
right.
All right.
Take care.